Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about building your first Adobe Captivate project with your brand, your company's organizational brand in mind. And we'll get started right after this. Okay, guys, thanks for joining today. We've got a couple of people on the chat right off the bat there. Of course, we've got Brett, Lori. Thanks for joining, Brett and Lori. Hopefully, we have a few other people joining before too long. Today, we're going to be talking about building an Adobe Captivate theme. And that might not mean a lot to very many people. But I'll just basically describe it more as a template for your e-learning moving forward. So hopefully you get a great deal of benefit out of today's session. I've done this a number of times, not only for the organizations that I've worked with, but also many of my clients as well have hired me to build that initial theme project. And we'll be working a lot within the themes drop-down menu within Adobe Captivate. This is completely applicable whether you're a Windows or Mac environment, but it's going to rely a lot on the brand settings, the brand choices. Today we're going to talk a little bit about this, and the challenge, of course, is the way I design a theme for Adobe Captivate. It may not be the way everyone does it, but I'm going to share with you my process and we'll get started from there. If you're in a situation where you find yourself even after today's session still very confused about this process, or you need additional help, don't forget that I am available for hire. Obviously, part of my job isn't just making free YouTube tutorials. A big part of it is actually being a working instructional designer, e-learning developer, much like many of you out there. So let me just open up a browser here, and I'll just put it on my desktop here and just remind you of what I'm all about. And we'll just switch to my desktop view for a moment here. This is my website, captivateteacher.com. The great thing about my website is that not only can you find out about the latest stuff that I'm talking about either on my YouTube channel or on various blog posts, but you can also, of course, purchase some consulting or instruction time. So click on how I can help, and I have the opportunity to sell you either my hourly rate, which is the same regardless of what you choose here, but most people go with instruction or consulting here. And I offer it in 1 hour increments, so you can purchase an hour to get started, and if you need more from there, we can do so. So if you need additional help with the process that I'm going to be covering today, by all means visit my website and check out what it is that I'm offering. And hopefully we can work together and come up with a solution that works for you. So back to webcam and chat here for a second. So the first thing that I typically do when I'm working with a potential client who needs me to develop a theme is I'm going to go through sort of a technical needs analysis. And what I mean by that is, I try to find out wherever possible what sort of desktop computers people are typically taking training on. Also, too, if the organization uses a particular smartphone, that's provided by the company, we can kind of target the screen sizes for that. Also, too, if the sales department has access to, a tablet or something like that that you typically might be using to complete training on, all of that information is going to be really helpful. Let me share my desktop with you guys for a moment here. Now I've got Captivate open. A big part of that conversation will also, dictate things like whether you're going to be doing responsive design or not. So a great website or a great tool that I use to check out what kind of resolutions, what kind of aspect ratio I need for an e-learning project is how big is my browser.com. And what's useful about this site is that you can check out the resolution not just of the device screen, which is important, but specifically the actual resolution of the browser window itself, right? So like if I'm looking at this particular site on, let's switch back to my webcam view for a moment here, and I'll just open my browser on my iPad and show you an example of how this can be useful. So let's say I was working for an organization that was going to develop training for their sales department, and everyone in the sales department had an iPad, for example. So if you wanted to design your training to be sort of portrait mode, as I'm holding it right here, you might use how big is my browser. And of course, this is a little obscure here, but hopefully that will be clear. You can see that minus the stuff at the top, right? The URL bar, the navigation controls, the different tabs and so forth, all the stuff that's part of the Safari browser is going to be subtracted from that particular resolution. You know, a good example is if I was to measure this screen, let's say in landscape mode like this, the actual screen size would be 1024 by 768. But as you can see here, some of that is subtracted. The 768 is reduced because in this instance here, part of that is used up by this stuff up here, all these items up here, the URL and all that stuff. So that's what's great about how big is my browser. And when you're designing for, let's say, responsive design, which is what I would encourage more people to do now, you want to consider, of course, the ideal size. So if you know that everyone in the sales department has an iPad, or if everyone within the sales department that's going to be using this training has a Samsung Galaxy phone, you can get your hands on that device, at least temporarily, check out how big is my browser, and when you return to Adobe Captivate, you could actually type those numbers in here. So if I'm going to use those numbers from my iPad, let's say 1024, well, let's do it portrait-wise here. So my width, in fact, would be 768 by 954. Now, there's a trick here, of course, because the size of the project here sort of assumes 1024 by 627. We're going to need to open up our properties inspector and make sure that we're previewing the height as well, and set the slide height to be the same as well. And then, of course, you'll be able to see what this would look like on an iPad. And in fact, you can click on the plus icon here and call this portrait. Well, let's make sure we follow the branding here, iPad. And this way, as you're building your e-learning course, you can actually be designing it based on that target device. So that's hugely important for you to do. And actually, for today's purposes, let's go with these sizes. It might change a few things that I would normally do, but this will really help us, with designing with that particular target device in mind. I've certainly seen a lot of organizations. In fact, one organization I did training for about a year ago, a little bit longer than a year ago now, distributed, rather than having computers in all their restaurants, they had iPads that would work off of the store or the restaurant's Wi-Fi, and then employees such as bartenders and servers and so on could complete their corporate training just using a reasonably inexpensive and easy to replace device, rather than a full-fledged computer, which would be, potentially more expensive and certainly bulky and not as portable. So there's some real there's some real advantages to designing with, let's say, a particular mobile device in mind. Now, the first thing that I typically do is I do a little research on the brand itself. So one of the things that I might do, let's minimize Captivate for a moment, and we'll open up my web browser here, and we'll just pick a particular brand that might be of interest to you. I'm in Canada, and we have kind of a famous coffee store, coffee restaurant, coffee shop called Tim Hortons. So let's say, for example, Tim Hortons approached me and said, hey, Paul, we want you to develop an e-learning course based on our brand requirements. One of the first things I got to look at is certain things like fonts. And in fact, I'm going to pause at this page here, even though Tim Hortons is available in the following countries. This is actually a nice, clean page to start with here, because I'm going to be focusing on capturing things like the company logo. So I might right-click on this image and start to save certain assets, perhaps to my desktop computer here. So we'll start off with a Tim Hortons folder, and I'll start to save the large red logo to that space as well. But here's another thing. I'm going to be using the brand fonts wherever I can as well. So I'm going to just use my screen capture tool. In this case, I'm using Snagit to capture that particular image there. So I'm just going to go like this, capture the Tim Hortons logo, and therefore the Tim Hortons script brand or font, if you will. And I'm just going to save that to my desktop. Actually, I'll save it right in here just so I have a copy of that as well. And this might be if I'm not going to bother saving the logo. Now, one of the things that I'm going to also do is go to my adobe.com account, and we're going to specifically go to, let's make sure I'm signed in with my account here, and I'll just do this on the other screen here. Bear with me a moment. Okay, so I'm logged in with my account here, and we actually want to go to fonts.adobe.com, or is it font.adobe.com? Nope, this is the right space. Fonts.adobe.com. So I'm going to use what was formerly known as Typekit Fonts, now just called Adobe Fonts, to actually create all the fonts that I need for this particular brand, so this theme. So using the search bar on fonts.adobe.com, I'm going to click on the little camera icon right over here in the search bar, and I'm going to upload that image. Let's go to my desktop where I've created the Tim Hortons logo here. I'll just use the screen capture version, not the version that I copied from their site. And fonts.adobe.com will analyze this and say, okay, is this the text that you're looking for? I'll say next step to confirm. And then it's going to say, check the text and update if needed. So it's interpreted that to be Tim Potons. So it's not right. So I'll just correct the spelling there. Click next step. And now I have a choice of different fonts that I'm going to select. So we need to find one that's appropriate or as close as possible to the Tim Hortons logo, because I'm going to use this throughout my training here. I'm starting to think that Relation is a good choice here. It's not exactly the same, but it might be close enough to satisfy their needs. Brush script is also really close. Um, yeah, it's a hard one to get because, of course, this is probably a custom font that dates back to the 1970s when this brand was first started. I'm still feeling stronger about the Tim Hortons here. So let's just assume that that's close enough for our needs here. I'm going to go in and, first of all, I'm going to view the family. I could activate the entire font, but I'm going to need, let's go with, there's a few variations here. Let's first of all type in the words for Tim Hortons here so we can have another closer look at it. So I'm feeling relation bold. So I'm going to activate this font for my account with Adobe so that I can use this in my design for this particular theme, and therefore everyone who's going to be using this theme will need to activate the relation bold font as well. Let's go back to the website. I'm going to click on English Canada here. And I'm also going to want this font that you see up here. It seems to be used prominently throughout their particular brand. The website is using some other fonts here that we could also identify. But let's just look at this one here. So let's also do a screen capture of just this stuff up here. Let's just grab all of that stuff, and I'm just going to save that to my desktop, and we'll do the same thing with Adobe Fonts. We'll go back and we'll upload that sample from here, and it's going to scan it like before and identify some text there. So that's good. Let's go next step here, and coffee menu, promos and fun, find Tim's. So it's identified all the text correctly. Let's go to next step here. And let's take a look at what fonts come up here. And just do a visual comparison. I'm not seeing anything. Rival seems... No, that's not right either. Novell, maybe. Prenton. I don't know. Fira is close, but it's not really. This is almost a serif font, but not quite. Like it has a subtle serif. Serif are those little embellishments at the end of each line of text. Let's see here. Rival looks close, but not quite. Mr. Eves? Not quite. This is tricky, but obviously you have to kind of pick something that's as close as you can get. Gosh, this is really... I thought this one would be easier than the other one here. I don't know. This Lexa is pretty close. I think I'm going to go with this. I'm going to view the family for this and take a closer look at the options here. Yeah, I think this is really close here. I'd prefer the... Yeah, I think this is the one I want to go with here. So I'm going to activate that font and click OK. I could activate the whole selection, but I really want to stick to just one or two fonts to make it easier for the end user to use this. It's tough. I almost want to go with like the extra bold. Yeah, in fact, I think I will go with the extra bold here and turn off the regular bold, and we'll just stick with that. So we have our fonts already installed. Let's go back to Captivate here. And let's first of all consider a couple of things. So we're going to be designing a theme from scratch. Now, the purpose of a theme is that, you know, if I was to select a theme, and let's just pick a theme right now for temporary purposes. Let's do this theme here. So I'm going to go ahead and agree to the coastal theme, and let's insert a new slide from the drop-down menu. You can see I have all of these different particular themes available, or it's master slides, if you will, available in this particular theme. So if I'm starting off with a title page, I might choose something like this. And as you can see, some of my choices of sizes here. Let's go back to desktop for a moment. You can see, of course, some work, some don't work, and you'll have to play around with that. But the idea with the theme is that, much like PowerPoint or other presentation software, you'll be able to very rapidly, very quickly build slides with all of the elements that already have your branding incorporated, including your colors and so forth. So in this case here, I'm going to choose a theme to start with that's as close to or as neutral as possible. The default theme is this Pearl theme, and I like starting with that because it is such a simple theme to begin with. It doesn't have a great deal of stuff already placed inside of it. You may have to reset the master slide for different slides themselves as you move along, but we'll start with this, and we'll keep it fairly simple and straightforward here. And again, this is a responsive design course. So let's go back to my portrait iPad view. And again, we'll just force the preview height to be a little bit taller than this. Going back to my iPad here for a second, just bear with me a moment. 954 is the number I want to use here. And I can't seem to actually force it to go taller. But for our purposes here, maybe what we'll do is we'll just stick with desktop view for right now. So you start off with your master slide. Now, the only thing you should put on the master slide is something that's going to be on every single slide no matter what. You can't really add fluid boxes to your main master slide, but you can do certain things. Like, for example, if we know that this particular branding is going to include some certain colors, let's go back here. If we wanted to generally have this, let's say this burgundy color will always be in the background of all of our slides. I'm just going to do a screen capture of maybe this here. We'll use that as a basis of our colors here. And I'm just going to save this to that folder as well. And on my main master slide, I'm going to click the media icon and import this image, temporarily, of course. So I just want to get the colors from it. There it is there. So you can see as soon as I place something on my main master slide, it appears on all subsequent slides. But again, this is just a temporary measure. I just want this background transition here. And we're going to create a custom background for the main master slide. And we're going to use a gradient fill. And we'll go into the slide colors here. We're going to change this from a radial gradient over to, the linear gradient that's here. And we'll just make sure that this is set up to be maybe the darker on the bottom here. Let's click on the bottom gradient here, and I'll use my eyedropper tool. For those that aren't quite seeing that on your YouTube channel, I'll just highlight that a little bit here. And we'll just grab this from the bottom there. And we'll do the top one as well, but I imagine we're probably going to have to add some additional gradients as well. So I'm just going to pick from sort of in the middle here. So that's pretty good. I'm going to have this more abruptly transition from the darker to the lighter here. So we'll just pick some colors here, and I'm just going to add another one here. So we get like a stronger transition from top to bottom there. And now, of course, I can delete this because now this pattern becomes the background for my main master slide. So let's start building some actual content here. So in this case here, I've gone to my title slide, and what I'm going to do, I won't be able to show you all of these slides or all possible master slides that you might be able to create because, of course, just what we've done so far is 25 minutes into this broadcast. So, but I'll show you a few slides and really emphasize something called object styles, which I'll explain as we go as well. So in this case here, this is a remnant from the old theme that I was using, the Pearl theme, and my titles, let's say I want them to use that particular font, that script font that we see in Tim Hortons. And to answer a question, just to go back to the chat for a moment here, I want to emphasize a couple things here. First of all, Brett is acknowledging that today is Thanksgiving here in Canada. Thank you for acknowledging that. Thanksgiving is earlier in Canada, I guess because we get snow before you guys do, and therefore our harvest would be a bit earlier than most folks in the United States. And of course, Lance here is asking, is there a reason why you wouldn't ask your client for the actual fonts they use? Well, in this case, I'm not actually working with Tim Hortons, so I don't really know. But yes, if they are using Adobe Fonts, one of the challenges, though, that comes up is that they may not be using Adobe Fonts. They might be using a custom font or a font that is just not available to the rest of the public world. So in many cases, you might have to choose something that's a bit of an alternative. In this example here, I'm not literally using the Tim Hortons font, just one that's close enough that learners won't necessarily be able to distinguish between the original and what we're doing here. But so let me go back to my desktop view here, and we'll get back to this here. So let's just go back to Adobe Fonts for a second here. And so Lexa is one of the fonts that we've chosen. And let's go back a couple of pages here so I can remind myself of which font I selected for that script. Hopefully it's in my history here. Relation, that's the one, yeah. So let's go to my character settings over here, and we'll go into my Adobe fonts. And when you take a look at your character drop-down selector here, you'll see theme fonts, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. You'll see all of your Adobe fonts, and as you scroll down, you'll also see web safe fonts and system fonts. The one you really have to watch for are system fonts. These are fonts that are installed on your computer, but may not necessarily be on your end user's device, whether it be a tablet, smartphone, desktop computer. For example, many of these Adobe fonts here get installed when I install certain applications like Photoshop or Illustrator, but doesn't mean that everyone's going to have access to them. So using those could create a bit of a disparaging appearance to your e-learning course, when viewed on a device that doesn't have those fonts installed. Web-safe fonts they're so universal, there's probably something, if not exactly the same, close enough on every other device. So Arial is pretty universal. It's been around for a long time, and you'll see it. It's boring, of course. That's one of the criticisms of it. But, it will be frequently found on the internet there. So here's the relation font. That's what we're going to use here. I'm going to change the color to, in this case, white. So I can just type this in manually, or I can use an eyedropper tool to select that. And we're going to, first of all, unlock from fluid boxes, because where I position this on the page may not be ultimately what I choose for here. So I'm going to, first of all, there's my title. Let's put that aside for a moment, but we're going to return to that and do a couple of things. So relation bold, 58, we'll come back to that. But the first thing is, let's configure this slide title to be somewhat like we want to have it. So I'm going to remove my fluid boxes that are in this theme by default, and I'm going to create my own organization of fluid boxes here. So we're going to do vertical. I'm going to have a little space at the top because I want the title to be centered, but I'm also going to add a subtitle as well. I'm going to have some space at the bottom, but I'm going to leave room at the bottom of the slide to add navigational controls. And of course you can play with this, but keep in mind that you should probably storyboard out your theme as well as your future e-learning courses and gain approval from your subject matter expert. So in this case here, you know what, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to use this as sort of a placeholder at the bottom. I'm going to have my navigation controls in this fluid box here. And this will be for a subtitle, and title will go something like there and have a lot of white space, or in this case, red space. And of course, this will work well, across a wide variety of devices here. I'm going to choose to squeeze in a column, and I'm going to configure some of these to also squeeze in a row. I'm a big fan of squeeze in a row whenever possible, because I find that wrap to next row, as far as a fluid box configuration, is going to be something I do less frequently than squeeze in a row. So I almost wish I could make this my default. I've asked Adobe to allow me to set in my preferences squeeze in a row or squeeze in a column to be my default wrap option, but that hasn't yet happened, but hopefully someday it will. So I'm going to select my title here, and we're going to place it where I want it in this particular fluid box arrangement here. So I'm going to uncheck unlock from fluid box so it snaps back into the appropriate fluid box. And let's change some other things too. I don't want it left aligned, and I don't need that 50 pixel margin. So I'm going to center it like so. And I think I'm going to bump up the font to, let's try 70 pixels. I kind of like that. Now, before I move away from this slide, the whole time I've been modifying an existing object style. In this case here, the default title smart shape style. And you'll know that I've modified it because there's a little plus icon or plus character at the beginning of the style name. Now, I'm going to use this moving forward and not the previous style that was there. So I'm going to go ahead and click this little tiny menu icon to the right of style name and save changes to existing style. And that's all well and good. So in the future, if I create additional slides that require the default title smart shape style, it will already have these changes that I've made to it here. Pretty happy with this, but I'd like to also have a subtitle too. So in this case here, I'm going to go into, in this case, my insert drop-down menu and take a look at placeholder objects. There's text caption, which will be useful for other slides in the future, but specifically I'm looking for subtitle. And that's going to bring in, again, it's the Perl subtitle, but that's not what I'm using in this case here. So in this case here, I'm going to actually go down and select Lexis Sans, which is the one that we chose before. I'm going to get rid of all the margins here. And of course, you could add whatever margin is appropriate for you. I just happen to don't have a need for any margins here. I kind of like the black, but I don't think that's in keeping with their brand colors as well. And that's something, let's take a pause moment before I finish changing this particular font. Let's go back to that website, Tim Hortons here, and let's see what the colors are. Let's just maybe do another little print screen here. I just captured some of those items here. I'm going to save this to my folder as well. And I think what I'll do is import that temporarily to this slide as an image. This one here. It's going to probably try to cram it in one of my, yeah, it's crammed it into my fluid boxes here. Let's unlock that from the fluid box. And I'm just going to resize this to be normal size or close to what would be normal. And I'm going to select this subtitle here, and I'm going to pick that beige color that's also prominently used throughout their website. And again, a better way to do this would probably be to, to Lance's point before, you ask your client for a branding document. And if you do a search on Google for brand documents or branding guides, you could probably find a few examples. And in those examples, you'll see details about the actual RGB codes for particular colors. And again, you might get more specific examples of, web-safe fonts that should be chosen and so on. So, but, in this case, this is a great alternative. Hey, maybe I'm pitching to Tim Hortons next week. Hey, you should hire me to do all your e-learning for you. And this could be, a great presentation tool to have something sort of built already to show them that I'm prepared to build this sort of stuff for them. So let's just zoom in a little bit here so we can get a sense of what we've got there. We've got the subtitle here. And again, I've made changes to it. And of course, I'm going to want to save those changes. So all future slides that use title and subtitle will have these fonts applied to it here. So let's save those changes as well. And the other thing I'm going to need to add to this particular master slide, and this is optional. You may find that not every example of this is ideal for all circumstances, but let's say in my argument or in my situation, having a begin button or a course start button makes sense for every single title slide that I'm going to create. So I'm going to actually use a smart shape. I'm going to use a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to place it in this space right here below the subtitle. And we're going to do something like that. That looks good. So we're going to need, again, some colors that are appropriate here. I could probably nick these just from the other objects that are on screen. I'm going to actually use this fill pattern that's in this title here for the background. I don't need a stroke, but I often will select the same color and then reduce it to 0, just so I don't have to see an outline on that. And let's add some text here. And we want this to match as well, so we're going to choose that Leica Sans font. And I think we'll bring that font up. Whatever feels good for you. I like 24 there. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the darker red from this background here for the text itself. So I think we have a really good slide title. Now, you're always going to have a blank slide. Oh, and I should point out here, let's exit the master slide here, and let's insert a new slide from, and we can select now the title. So we have everything we need to essentially build our first slide. So I'll just delete those other ones here. I can double click and we can just type in, let's choose the appropriate Tim Hortons eLearning. And then in subtitle, you know, new hire orientation or something like that. There, that slide is done, and that's very easy to use. And of course, you can't edit any of these fluid boxes. You won't be able to delete them because they only exist on the master slide. And that's actually true for the begin button that I've created as well. It only exists on the master slide. And that might be one of the reasons why you don't want to put things like navigation controls on the master slide, because you might want to edit them. You might want a different, title for that. Not a big deal, because of course you can always go to your master slide and add those elements there. But you're going to have additional elements as well. So you can start by either editing the items that you see here on the other master slides, or what I mostly do is I'll probably delete these additional master slides and come up with master slides that are truly my own. But I want to emphasize one point here. Let me actually delete a whole bunch all at once. There are certain master slides you cannot delete. For example, question slides, hotspot, Likert, and your quiz results slide are sort of default. And you won't really be able to change those too much. Let's go ahead though and maybe customize this question slide here. So there are some elements that are different from one another. Like in this case here, we have, and I won't change too much because of course you can spend many hours building a theme like this. So let's select the question title here. We already know that this is sort of what we're looking for here. So relation bold 70. So let's go here. Maybe the font size won't be quite as large. Relation bold. And let's go 40. No, let's 50. 50 I like. That's not too bad. Again, we're going to make the background or the text white to contrast the red background here. We also have this question X of Y. And actually, to that point, let's pause for a moment here and just talk a little bit more about these fonts. These are great fonts for a title and a subtitle. But if you're going to have, like, let's say a question stem or a series of answers, you may want something a little bit more generic for those as well. Here's another tool, and I'll see if I can open up a new window of Chrome, if this is possible. There we go. And let's go to the Tim Hortons website again. Here's a file extension, or sorry, a Chrome extension that I found particularly interesting that I stumbled across one day. And you'll see it right here. It's called What Font? And you can find that by adding the appropriate Chrome extension. And what's useful about this is when I turn this on, and you'll see a button suddenly appear called Exit What Font, this will allow you to take a look at what font is being used everywhere else on this page. Here's a font called Grease Pencil. Here's Sophia Pro. Proxima Nova features prominently throughout the site. And actually, it's coming up Helvetica, but I don't think that's actually true in this case. Laudacio, Let's take a look at that in Adobe Fonts, see if that's available. And again, this goes back to Lance's comment before. Let's go to Adobe Fonts. And sometimes, also to Lance's earlier comment about why I wouldn't simply ask the client for the actual fonts they use. More often than not, you're working with the HR department. So what was this one called again? Laudatio. I don't know how you pronounce that. Laudatio. Yeah, it's not finding anything. So again, it's probably a custom font. But if I'm going to use for just general text like here, it looks like Proxima Nova is going to be another good choice for me there. So let's go back to fonts.adobe.com. And I know that Proxima Nova is on Adobe Fonts, and I believe it's actually something I already have activated here, so I should have no problem using it. I've used it for other projects quite frequently. So, for this stuff here, like the pagination or progress indicator, if you will, I'm going to switch that to Proxima Nova. And we're going to make the text on that white as well. And same thing for this here. The fill color, I'm going to choose that beigey color, and then the text itself, we'll choose the darker red, and we'll use that Proxima Nova for that as well. Not the thin. I would recommend, of course, to still consider your end user. Your client might have certain marketing requirements, but you have an obligation to the learners themselves to make sure that the fonts you choose are easily recognizable, easily readable. Avoid all capital letters, things like that. We'll do the same thing here. And so we've changed that to Proxima Nova. And we'll go regular here, and we'll change the color. In this case, I'm going to go with white. So we have some initial choices, and I would continue to make those changes. All the while making sure that I save those changes to the existing style here. So save changes to existing style, and I'll do the same thing here. So that will not only update the style, but it will also update many of the subsequent slides as well. So you see this has already been switched over to Proxima Nova. So you can make changes, using essentially a broader brushstroke, if you will. Sometimes certain things don't update, in which case, all it usually requires is from that same menu, reset style. And it didn't work in this case here. Let's do this. Here's another feature of Adobe Captivate that is useful. Oh, you know what? I didn't save that style. Let's save changes to existing style. And now let's check here. Yeah, so it's been updated there as well. And all subsequent question slides have been updated. Similarly, let's grab this little object here. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it just over here, because I'm going to copy the style of my Lexa Sans extra bold button to my quiz question buttons, of course. And there are literally well over a couple of dozen buttons for all of my master slides here. And again, the real advantage of saving all of this stuff as the actual object styles is you're saving yourself a lot of work later on. So I'm going to select the background color, and we're going to keep this transparent here. Let's add a corner radius so it's got that rounded rectangle look to it as well. The stroke will be the same. The text color will be that darker red. And again, we'll choose our appropriate colors here. And what do we have for extra bold 24? I don't think I quite want to go that size, but let's say 20. That's pretty good. And so I think I'm happy with that button now. Let's click on the little tiny menu icon, and I want you to watch what's not only happening to the buttons here, but all the buttons on the subsequent slides as well. This is a really poignant example of how updating your object styles as you go will save you a lot of time later. So let's save the changes to the existing style almost instantly. My skip, back, clear, review buttons, and of course all the buttons on my subsequent slides have been updated, including my quiz results slide. So you can, I would say gradually over the course of, let's say, one day, you can build an e-learning template, for lack of a better word, all the while making sure that you save your object styles. And if there's anything outstanding, what you would then do is go into your Edit drop-down menu and do a quick review of your Object Style Manager for the entire theme here. So let's go in here. This is kind of like breaking all of your object styles down into the individual categories of objects that are available. I like to open this right up, make sure I'm seeing every object style, and go through and modify sort of like a mini version of your properties inspector over here, and make sure that all of this works. So for example, throughout the course you might have need for a runtime dialog or a JavaScript dialog. Let's make sure it's using the right fonts here. So we want something very readable. So we're going to probably choose again that Adobe font that we selected for the buttons, Lexa Sans. You won't really see it here, but the important thing is you can of course then select the background colors. The text color could be white in this case. So you're choosing colors that are appropriate for the brand. Also too, you'll see of course the ability to adjust all the different items that are here. In this case here, this is now our default quiz button. I kind of went quickly today, but I want to emphasize that you're going to have a rollover and down state for each of these buttons. So spending some time making sure that you have the appropriate colors chosen. And quite often you can get this from the website as well, because you can do a screen capture of what a rollover and a down state for all the different buttons are. And again, the same thing for your feedback for all your quiz questions. Just edit those, edit the fonts. And so by a combination of doing it literally on the slide as I've done here, but again, before you're done, go in and review all of your different styles and build additional slides as necessary. So what I'd like to do at this point here, again, this is a very high-level overview of the process. The last thing that you would do, let's exit from the master slide here, and let's go to our themes drop-down menu and save theme as, and this will open up my save dialog. We'll go to my desktop and my working folder, and we'll call this the Tim Hortons theme. And then once you have that built out, as you're creating new projects, let's just create a new responsive design project here. You can very quickly apply those themes from the themes icon in your toolbar. You won't see it here. You could, in theory, place that theme file that you just saved in the same location of all the default stuff, but every time you reinstall Captivate, you might lose that. So I encourage you to keep it with the project files and folders that you would use for that organization. So I can select this now, open it. This will override all of my object styles with the Tim Hortons theme. And of course, I'll be able to start adding those various objects as I've created them there. So we have about 5 minutes left in this live stream. I've covered a lot today. I hope that this has been of benefit to you guys. What I'd like to do is just kind of open it up to the chat, and if there are any questions, that I can address here, I'd love to do so. I'd love to answer any questions. Certainly welcome any feedback on this particular live stream. So fire away. Lance, if you have any questions about fonts, that's certainly fine. I'm welcome. That's certainly welcome. So Paul Anthony says, hey, Paul, thanks for all the information. You're welcome, Paul. I hope it's been of benefit to you. Again, just to emphasize, part of my reason for existence is to help all of you guys out, and maybe earn a couple of bucks in the process. So if this is an area that you think you could benefit by, you'd like to purchase an hour or two of my time, and I could help you build the actual theme for your organization, I'm more than welcome. I'm more than happy to do that. You can just visit my website at captivateteacher.com. Click on the How I Can Help You link at the top and select consulting and teaching. And, you can purchase an hour or two of my time. I'll get back to you. We can schedule a session. We'll be able to see each other just like this. If you want to be able to, work with me, of course, I'll send out a web conferencing link, and we'll be able to share screens and all that stuff. Paul Anthony's asking a question. I have a question. I want to add multiple 6 quizzes to the same e-learning project, but the question counter at the bottom has a running total of all quizzes. So I'm of the belief that these days I would separate out, like Paul's asking, or should I link to separate e-learning projects for each quiz, or is there a way of having them all in one project? I'm not a fan of jamming everything into one project. I think, this is the world we live in these days. This device, and this device here. So the world is changing. The world of sitting in front of your computer for the next hour and a half or 2 hours to do e-learning, that world is going away, thankfully. I think it's actually not the best way to learn. What I really like is the concepts behind micro-learning, where you have everything broken down into the smallest possible unit of e-learning in a single Captivate course. So, maybe it's a 5-minute module with 4 or 5 questions at the end. I would have that as a separate unit, and then allow your LMS to organize those into what is commonly referred to as a course shell. So you have a course shell. This is everything you need to know about safety at your organization. And within that are published out Captivate projects, each with their own quiz. Don't worry too much about the numbering. The purpose of pagination, or as it's also known, I can't think of it right now. Pagination is good. The purpose of it is to allow learners to know how much they have to do to finish this particular chunk of learning. So I only worry about, again, that smallest element of e-learning, which is the module, the lesson, whatever you want to call it. And then from there, I just say this is 1 of 5, 2 of 5, 3 of 5, 4 of 5, 5 of 5. And then you're good to go. Chunking is definitely the way to go. And the real advantage is later on when someone says, hey, we need a safety course for this other group over here. If you've already got 5 or 6 modules that address their learning needs, you don't need to do anything. You just assign them those in perhaps a different course shell. And maybe you just do the differences. You create some additional modules. And the beauty of having your own corporate theme, as I've discussed today, is that you can apply that same look and feel to all your courses. And then the learners in this new group that are taking, 5 or 6 different individual modules separate, but kind of overlapping with that original group have no idea that you've borrowed from that other learning curriculum. So there's some real advantages of designing using these themes and just having these small little chapters, if you will, that contribute to the bigger picture there. So Ariel says, have you or will you be planning on doing a live tutorial like this on how to deal with an organization's LMS for those who aren't too familiar with LMSs? I have a couple tutorials about the Adobe Captivate Prime LMS, but honestly, Ariel, there are 500 at last count LMSs out there. There's so many to possibly cover. I don't know that I'd be able to offer very much in that area, because again, the challenge with that particular topic is that it potentially is extremely massive. You could talk for days and days about learning management systems. I really try to separate that out. I really try to say, listen, to my clients who are having LMS issues, the thing I focus on is I will test a course with something like Scorm Cloud, for example. And if I just bring up Scorm Cloud here and show you I'll bring up Adobe Captivate and just show you that again. When I preview a project or when I'm in the testing stage for a project, I will preview in Scorm Cloud, because Scorm Cloud is the standard, the actual e-learning standard that exists. And when you upload to Scorm Cloud, you know for sure that this project works to that specification. And incidentally, it's called Scorm Cloud, but it also will accept not just Scorm 1.2, but Scorm 2004. And in addition, you'll also have not Scorm at all, but in this case here, my window size is weird here, so yeah, I'm having too much. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it almost worked. Let's relaunch that course again. So again, one of the difficulties, there we go. So I didn't type anything there, but if it works on Scorm Cloud as you would expect it to, and of course when you exit the course, you'll be able to get results and see reports, and you'll literally have, of course, whether the course was suspended, did you satisfy the learning, the raw score, and all the particulars that you can use to troubleshoot your course with various LMSs. But the truth of the matter is that when you're publishing your e-learning course, and we go to e-learning output, which is currently disabled here, we're talking about these 4 different standards. And learning management systems sometimes do things their own way, and you'll learn this. There's some notable examples. Blackboard comes to mind, but there are others too that like to just do things a little bit differently, and you may have to play around with your configuration and so forth. I'm not sure I could contribute much to a particular live stream on that, but certainly that's a challenge here. Paul Anthony wrote some additional thoughts down here. Let's take a look here. I'm a huge believer in making e-learning progressive. I think more learners will want to manage their time so they can complete a module on a bus or a train. I agree 100%, Paul. I'm always thinking of, that person who's commuting. Although I live sort of more in a rural area at this point, most of my professional career is in the Toronto area, and traffic, public transit, regional train systems, people aren't driving in their, well, there's lots of people driving in their cars. Potentially there would be more, but people are, you know, they don't have cars, or they've just sick and tired of fighting traffic. So, you know, the opportunity to sit there with a set of headphones on and complete an e-learning course as you go, because you're just killing time. You might as well complete what's required of you by the organization that you work for. You know, why not? Paul's also asking, what is your opinion on font size that is desktop and cell phone friendly? When you're designing with responsive design, that sort of takes care of itself to a degree. Let me bring this back to my desktop again here, and I'll just show you what I mean here. So for this slide, for example, I've set some font sizes that are appropriate, but with responsive design in Adobe Captivate, what happens is that on a slide-by-slide basis, you can set what the minimum font size is. I don't think I would drop much below 10 points, regardless of whether it was intended for desktop or mobile. But you can really literally set the size however you wish, and then just make sure it doesn't drop below a certain percentage. Because obviously on a device such as a smartphone, you can see here in edit mode, I'm not really seeing what I should be seeing here. Let's delete this slide, and we'll just add a title here. We'll just put Tim Hortons in there, and we'll try that same thing once it catches up with me here. Employee orientation or something like that. Let's preview this in, let's do this. Let's do a live preview on devices. And what I'm going to do is, I love this feature in Captivate, by the way, the ability to take your smartphone using either some sort of camera app, which I'll use in this case here. And I'm just going to open up the camera app in my iPad. You're not seeing me do this, but what's happening now is, let's go now to this, and you'll see that I have the e-learning course up here. Let's press the big play button, and there it is, with the fonts intended as before. But you can see it shrunk down the Tim Hortons font, you know, to accommodate the smaller screen size. So, and of course everything will work as expected. It's hard to do backwards here. Well, there's no slide after this, so, but you know, it doesn't take too long to build that out. But as your size of screen shrinks, you're going to have obviously the scaling will kick in and adjust the size of what you see on your screen. Now, a couple things to note about designing for responsive design, and this is separate from theme building, but as you're building your e-learning course, if your target device is one of these, right, you can't design the same way that you would design for a giant, large 1920 by 1080 26-inch computer monitor. Because if you need someone to read off of this screen, do you want it to be this super text-heavy stuff that they have to scroll through and read? Or do you want maybe it to be more audio-based? So I like to move more of that content over to something like audio, because audio on a smartphone and audio on a computer are both listened to in exactly the same way. But on-screen text is a completely different animal when you move from mobile device to desktop. So the greater variability in your e-learning would be trying to move more of that text-heavy stuff into narration, or even replace it with video or audio or narration, or something along those lines. So hopefully that helps you out. So that's pretty much it for today, guys. I think this has been a great live stream. I hope that, I hope that you found this valuable. If you like this particular live stream, please share it with your colleagues. Hit the like button down below. And if you want to see more content like this, and of course get notified every time I do a new live stream or publish a new e-learning tutorial, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the little notification bell, which looks like this dude right here, so that every time something new comes out, you get notified that I've got some new content for you. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for joining, and we'll hopefully see you next week. If you thought this video was useful, please share it with your colleagues. If you need help with your next e-learning project, consider hiring me. My focus is to create effective e-learning that helps you achieve your business goals. Visit my website at captivateteacher.com, follow me on Twitter at CaptivateTeacher, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel.